Hi, my name is Abby, and I will be doing my presentation on the development of intelligence testing. Francis Galton was basically the pioneer of intelligence testing. He believed that sensory acuity is the basis of intelligence, and sensory acuity is the knowing of the world through your senses. He believed that sensory acuity was hereditary, which therefore intelligence would be inherited. He would test this by taking the offspring of individuals like judges, musicians, poets, literary men, scientists, etc. And he would study the hereditary value of intelligence through those offspring. And he actually found that the offspring would have corresponding intelligence levels to their parent. He did a lot of his measurement and testing in what he called anthropometric laboratories, and that is where he would test his intelligence a lot. He was also the first to come up with self-questionnaires. James McKeen Cattell was heavily influenced by Galton, and he was a self-proclaimed disciple of Galton's. In 1980, he had coined the term mental test in an article that he had written. Within this article, he described at least 10 mental tests that could be administered to the overall public. And the items within this test were mainly Galtonian, which means that they had included things like reaction times, deciphering weight, and remembering letters, which is something that Galton would also test. His findings for the test were refuted by Clark Weisler due to poor validity and reliability. However, Cattell was the first to bring Galton's testing procedures to the US and also measured sensory acuity and reaction times, even though he was refuted by that. Alfred Binet had multiple careers in psychology. He got his second wind after humiliation from hypnotism and began his focus on intelligence testing with his two young daughters to see their mental operations. With his two young daughters, he would investigate spatial awareness, short-term working memory, visual acuity, and reaction times. He would later meet Theodore Simon, who worked in an institution for children with developmental disabilities, and Simon would later ask Binet to supervise his research. Binet and Simon would begin creating tests for children with developmental disabilities to test differences between intellectually normal children and children with mental disabilities. The two would create the first intelligence test that measured intelligence directly instead of through sensory acuity, and it would be called the Binet-Simon Scale of Intelligence. This would test multiple cognitive and physical abilities, and they would later revise their test in 1908 to test beyond developmental disabilities and test the levels of intelligence among normal children. In 1911, William Stern coined the term mental age, which identified ages where children of normal ability could perform tasks, which were determined by the Binet-Simon scale. He offered that mental age can be divided by actual age to reveal an intelligence quotient, which we now know to be IQ. Henry Herbert Goddard would translate the Binet-Simon scale from French to English and introduce it to the US. The US would later use that translation as an intelligence test to screen people coming into the country through Ellis Island. Lewis Terman would pick up that translation and make accurate modifications to the scale and revise it to become the Stanford Binet test. He also adopted Stern's IQ philosophy by multiplying score ratio by 100, and the test would be altered in 1916, 1937, and 1960. Robert M. Yerkes would then contribute to the intelligence test by offering the idea that all individuals should be given the Binet-Simon test and would not account for age at all, except to use it as a frame of reference for how testing procedures are done. Thank you for listening to my presentation on the development of the IQ test.